Roger.
Senior member, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So much.
Well, thank you very much. I must say, originally I thought this was primarily a young people's group, and I am happy to see several young people here, but I'm also very happy to see a number of older people, if I can call you that. So I have a long story to tell because I'm quite old. And because of that, I think maybe it would be good to break it down into a few pieces. So I thought I'd take the first 20 years or so of my life, which I might call childhood and early school. And then the next 10 years, which is West Point and the military. And then we could have, I would say, about 30 years of my career in business. And then finally, I hate to say this, but 40 years of retirement. I hope all of you all of you people can look forward to that long retirement, but I've been very lucky to live this old. I'm going to have two other separate pieces. One of them is to talk about my family and what my family has meant to me. And then finally at the end, just have a few little observations about life in general. And I must say, when I get to that point, I think I'm going to be talking primarily to the young people here because they have such long lives ahead of you. So let's start with my story. I was born in a little town that I guess some of you may know the name of. It's called Essex Fells. It's over there in Essex County between Caldwell and Roseland. And I was born in 1926, and this is an early picture of me. And what I'll do is just pass these around. This is probably, I don't know what the age is, but already I was interested in round balls, which became an important part of my life. I was brought up in what I would say is quite a well-to-do, wealthy town, if any of you know Essex Fells. Lovely homes, and I must say my family was a little bit different. Neither my mother nor my father went to college. My mother was brought up in New York City and went to Catholic school. My father was brought up in the Patterson area, actually in Newark, and I think he finished high school in Newark, but that's as far as he went. We lived in, as I say, a very wealthy town, but not in a big house. Dad had built in the early 1920s a little bungalow, and I'll pass this along. This is a picture of the house. It's just one story. It had a total of 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, living room, dining room, kitchen, and that was about it. I had 2 sisters, a big sister 9 years older than I was, and a little sister 2 years younger. They lived together in one room. I lived upstairs in the attic room, just a single room all by itself next to the attic itself. He was 2 years older than I was, and my mother and father in the other room, and we had 1 bathroom. So you can imagine how mornings were, everybody taking a turn in the bathroom. This was during the Depression. Now, most of you do not remember the Depression. This, of course, was the very bad years in the 30s. And my dad was out of work for a couple of years, and although we lived in a fair house, why, it wasn't like most of the houses in the town. I remember just a couple of incidents that bring to mind what the Depression was like. I can remember my mother making donuts, and we're selling them in the neighborhoods to make a few extra pennies. That's how bad that was. I also remember being out in the front yard, and I was playing with one of the neighbor's boys, and we were playing with my mother's kitchen knife, flipping it and trying, of course, to make it stick in the ground. And unfortunately, the little paring knife broke. And I can remember what a terrible thing this was for my mother to lose a paring knife. They just didn't have the money to replace that very easily. So that's just a couple of memories of those early years in that little house. My father in the 20s worked for an outfit called Pierce Arrow. Maybe some of you older men remember that name. That was quite a car back in the 20s. He worked for Pierce Arrow and therefore had a 1920 Pierce Arrow. I have a picture of it, and it's, I think all cars in those days were just straight black. And he had that car, I guess I was out of West Point by the time he finally sold it. So it served him very well, but a couple of things about the car. This was before the days of turn signals. So if you wanted to make a turn, you couldn't just click the turn signal thing. And if my mother wanted to go to the right, she'd put her arm out and go like this. If she wanted to go to the left, she'd point like this. If she wanted to go to the right, she'd put her arm like this. So that's the way she made her signals to turn. And as I say, Dad kept that car probably for 30 years or so. I went to, Essex Fells had a little school with 8 grades. Each of the grades was probably about 20, 25 students, a wonderful little bringing up, I would say. And we lived up the hill from the school, so for lunch I would leave school whenever we got out, 12 o'clock or whatever, and run up the hill and have lunch for 20 minutes and then run down the hill for the afternoon session. It was a wonderful experience being in a little school like that. I did get involved with the Boy Scouts at a very early age. My father was active in the Scouts. He wasn't a scout, what do you call it? Well, yeah, he was active in the Scout leadership, but not at the troop level. My big brother was very active, became an Eagle. I must say I was in it for a year or two and made it to first class. And looking back, I think I was very idealistic at this young age, and it bothered me that the Scouts had these high standards, and yet, I don't know, some of my friends were out breaking street lights and that sort of thing. And I just didn't get the idea that we had to go through a stage of living that we're not always the best we are, but let's learn what we can. So looking back, I regret that I got out of the Scouts at an early age and didn't stick with it like my big brother, who was an Eagle. Church was very big to me. In Essex Fells, there's a little church, it used to be a little church, called St. Peter's. And my mother was extremely active. She was a choir mother and took care of vesting us boys in the choir, and also she'd always sit in the front row and make sure that we were behaving up in the choir stalls. Choir was a very big thing, and at one point we had a new choir master join us. His name was Reginald Hughes Church. Came over from England. He had been brought up in the British choir system, then became a musician and choir master himself. He was just wonderful. We had a choir probably of, I would say 15 or 16. Most of us sopranos. We did have, the older boys were altos. And Mr. Church, after he'd been there a year or two, started having boys' choir concerts. And twice a year we would have a concert in the school and have a wonderful program of not necessarily religious things, Gilbert and Sullivan songs and all of that. And I have wonderful memories of being in that choir. One other thing we did a little bit later, he arranged with a funeral home in Montclair, Meyer and Lindquist, maybe they're still there, I don't know. But he arranged that to take a couple of us choir boys down to funerals, and there'd be a casket there, and of course people at the funeral, and we'd be up this flight of stairs, and we'd sing a few hymns like Lead Kindly Light and other hymns appropriate to a funeral. Abide with me. Well, we got very sad news just after I finished the 8th grade in Essex Fells. My dad got us together and said, I'm sorry, but we're going to have to move. He just had a very tough time during the Depression. He was out of work for the better part of 2 years, and he just could not carry the mortgage payments on our house, and we moved to Montclair. Next door to us was a family called the Wiggins, and Uncle Paul, we called him. They'd moved up from Montclair, and he owned a house in Montclair that he said, I'll rent this to you, Mr. Conover. I think the rent at that time was probably $50 a month, I don't know. This was a very nice house on Upper Mountain, if you know Montclair, Upper Mountain Avenue is a very nice house. This was not at the real ritzy end of it, but it was a nice enough house, and that's where I went to school when I was in junior high and high school. I went to Montclair High School, a very fine high school, and made some very good friends there that have kept with me most of my life. Of those friends, 10 of us sort of stuck together over the years and visited each other's houses for dinner, and we'd go to Martha's Vineyard, not Martha's Vineyard, but Bermuda every now and then for vacations, and just wonderful friends. Of those 10 people, we're now down to just a couple still living, but just wonderful memories of raising families and knowing people my age. Toward the end of, well, I guess I was a sophomore actually in high school, we used to get Life magazine, and in the fall of 1941 there was a magazine saying USA's West Point. This was just a few weeks before Pearl Harbor, as a matter of fact. This article caught my eye, and as a matter of fact, not this particular copy, but the copy I had, I cut up, and I put it on the wall of the room where I studied, and that became sort of a goal of mine that I wanted to go to West Point. This Uncle Paul, who lived next door, had taken us up to West Point when I was a very young boy to see football games, so I did have very early memories of being up there, but got a real interest when I read this article. And so for the rest of my high school years, my ambition was to go to West Point. I'm not sure, I think the system for appointments to West Point is very much the same today. You young people might be interested. Each congressman has one appointment, approximately one appointment per year. So your congressman and senator can appoint someone from his district to be a cadet. So I learned that system, and as a matter of fact, my junior year, I was so interested, I took a course in New York City at a little school called the School of 10, and these were young fellows at my age who were interested in the academies. And we took a very intensive course, heavy on learning all about English literature and very, very heavy on mathematics. And I think that's one of the reasons why when I finally took the examination, given by the congressman that I came out first and got appointed to the academy. Very good news for my parents, who I don't think were looking forward to the costs of college for me. I won't pass this around, but just a wonderful article about it. So on July 1st of 1944, I got on, my father drove me over to Weehawken, and at Weehawken I caught a train and took it along with, I guess there must have been another 60 or 70 young fellas just like me in civilian gear. Took the train up to West Point. At that time there was a station at West Point. It's no longer there, it's not on the line. But I can remember getting there at the station and then having these upperclassmen meeting us and putting us in ranks, pretty ragged ranks at that point. We didn't know anything, and marching up the hill, and my life was forever changed. This was the beginning of, maybe some of you know the term plebe year. This is the first year that a cadet goes through, and it's sort of a very rugged year, both physically and mentally too. You're treated like so much dirt, and understand that you really are nothing, and you have to follow the orders, and later on you'll get a chance to be ordering the plebes around yourself. But in the meantime, it was a very unhappy 1 year of plebe year. Let me say a little bit about the program there. I don't know what your college plans are, but I think maybe you can at least think about one of the military academies, Naval, Air Force, or West Point. And West Point at that time, and it's much the same in emphasis, very heavy on science and engineering, not so heavy on the social studies, but certainly a very good spattering of English literature and things like that. I think probably 60% of their curriculum is in the engineering and science end of the business. At that time, every cadet took exactly the same course, and we were put in sections of 12 or 15 cadets. We'd line up in the area of barracks and march to the academic building and go to our classrooms. The arrangement of the classes was by academic rank in each subject. So in trigonometry, for example, if you were good, you'd be in the first section. If you're poor, you'd be in the 16th section. And those sections would change every couple of weeks depending upon how you were doing in the class. At that time, I'm not sure whether they do the same thing, but the call was for every cadet to recite in every class every day. So if you were in a math class, why, the professor would say, take boards, and all 15 cadets would go up to the blackboards and put down the answers, the solutions to the day's work. I think it's much the same now, with an emphasis on individual cadets and making sure that they're not only in class every day, there's no question about that, but also reciting every day. Some of you may have been to West Point. The main focus of interest is the big chapel up on the hill, a beautiful building, and this has been the Protestant chapel for many, many decades. There's also a Catholic chapel, but as a Protestant, I would get in ranks on Sunday morning and we'd march up the hill to church. It was mandatory, and I think that has gone by the wayside, and cadets no longer have to go to church. But I must say that Chapel was a very big influence on my life then, and of course continues to be. I'll say a little bit about athletics. Of course, the Army football team was a big thing in those days. Doc Blanchard and Glenn Davis, some of the old people might remember those names from the 40s. I was not a football player, but I did play baseball. I was a pitcher, and I was starting pitcher for the last couple of years, and wonderful memories of playing against the other Ivy League clubs and other teams in the area. I do have memories playing against Yale, and their first baseman at that time was a fellow named George Herbert Walker Bush. And George Bush at that time had already been in the Navy, and of course you read about his exploits and getting shot down, and I guess he was shot down, yes. In any event, he came back to Yale, so that by the time I got to know him on the baseball field, he was 24, 25, very imposing person. And some years later, I wrote to him, and I had made a oil painting of him, and I put him on, this is the sort of well-known fence at Yale, but I put him with the West Point background. I mailed it. He was captain of the team. I sent a picture. I didn't send this to him, but I sent a picture of it, and got a very nice note back from him saying, "Dear Roger, thanks for the nice memories, and I think back to those great years of college ball. Good luck, and best to you, George Bush." That was back in, I guess, 98 or 99, something like that. A little bit of a memory from my baseball days. Okay, so we graduated in 1948, and 3 years after I graduated, I was married. That was back in the days. Many men may get married at 29 or mid-30s or something like this, but I don't know. It was sort of the style in those days to marry at a rather young age, so I married my girlhood sweetheart on the 30th of, let's see. Well, anyhow, we had at least time for a, no, I'm sorry, I'm a little bit ahead of myself. Yes, no, this makes sense. Got married 3 weeks after I graduated, and then we went on our honeymoon. And then after West Point graduation in those days, anyone who was in the ground forces, that is infantry, artillery, armor, engineers, went to Fort Riley, Kansas. There was something called the Ground General School. And so all of us who were in the ground forces went out there. I think there were about 200 of us who graduated and went into the ground forces. The other 100 went into the Air Force. This was before the days of the Air Force Academy, so that some of the cadets opted for the Air Force, and they went immediately from West Point to flight training. The rest of us went to Fort Riley. We had something called the Ground General Course for 5 months. After that, we peeled off into our branch schools. I was Corps of Engineers, so went to the Engineer Basic Officers course at Fort Belvoir, Virginia, just out of Washington. It was a wonderful time, not only learning about the real Army, but it also was wonderful from a personal standpoint. So many of us did get married just after graduation, so we were young and at that point without children. The wives would meet us at lunch and we'd all get together for a sandwich and pop before afternoon classes. Got to know very closely all of my classmates and their wives in those very early days at Riley and Belvoir. Okay, then it was time to get our first assignments. And the Cold War was just sort of warming up at this point. This would be the summer of 1949. We got our orders. We didn't know where we were going to go at first. And most of us in the ground forces were put on a boat to England, where the U.S. Army had a very large number of ground forces. A lesser number went to the Pacific for duty in Japan or Hawaii. So those of us going to Europe, we got on a troop ship, and I say a troop ship, but the wives were along, all except my wife. Unfortunately, she was quite pregnant at this time, and they said, "You're too pregnant to go over to Europe." So I left her in Montclair. I got on the ship with the others, and we arrived in Bremerhaven, Germany, and there a telegram was awaiting from my wife saying, "You're the father of a little baby girl." So that was good news. That, in addition to orders, when we got to Bremerhaven, it told us what post to go to in Germany. I opened my orders, and it said, "Report to headquarters, U.S. Forces, Austria," in Salzburg, Austria. That was where just a few of us went. Of my classmates, just about 8 of us went to Austria, and most of them were assigned to Germany. So my wife was back home, and she had to wait 4 months before my little daughter was able to come over. And so my wife and daughter flew over. I drove up to Frankfurt, Germany, and met them there, and brought them back to Austria. So I'll say a little bit about duty in Austria. Relatively few U.S. troops. There was what we call a regimental combat team, 3 or 4 battalions of infantry. There was a battalion of armored people, and then there was a battalion of engineers. And when I got there, of course, I was assigned to the engineer battalion as a platoon leader, the first step on the move up the ranks of an Army officer. And I was assigned a platoon, and fortunately, I had a platoon sergeant. To a platoon leader, the most important person in the world is a platoon sergeant. Sergeant Vallant had fought through World War II in the infantry. He'd worked his way up from private to master sergeant in the infantry, survived World War II, and then decided to take a transfer to the engineers and started all over again on learning the engineer trade. By the time I ran into him, he was a staff sergeant, and very quickly was up at a master sergeant. And what a wonderful aid to me as a fresh lieutenant. The first thing my platoon did there was to be assigned to take part in maneuvers with the French. The French were down in the French zone in Innsbruck. And very early in the game, I took my platoon out on maneuvers with the French, and wonderful working with the young French captain that I was assigned to help out. And that was sort of my initiation to working with engineer troops. Let's see. I might have a couple of pictures here that I'll send around. Oh, here are some of my days as a cadet. That's when I was a first capman, first classman. These are a couple of pictures all surrounded around from maneuvers in Austria. One of the things we did as combat engineers was learn all about floating bridges. And these were pontoon bridges that we learned quickly how to put together and to put in the water and assemble in the water across the river. This is a scene on the Traun River, and it shows my platoon trying to jockey these very heavy rubber pontoons into place to put them in as part of the bridge in a very swift-moving river. At one point, later on, I was given the job of training in a winter warfare school that was close by where we lived. This was in a town called Saalfelden, and I was assigned to lead a little winter warfare school teaching kids who really didn't know how to ski a little bit of winter warfare on skis, and that was a lot of fun and something new for me too. Let's see, one thing I didn't pass around, and I should have, going back to West Point, there's a picture of me in my full dress uniform when I was probably a yearling, just a couple of years in. And some of you at St. Mark's know that I do some cartoon work here. I had sort of forgotten this, but when I was a cadet, I got into cartooning, and we had a cadet magazine that went out every month, and I used to do some cartoons for them showing cadet life. So that led to my being cartoonist at St. Mark's. One thing I didn't mention about cadet life, the chapel was very important to me, and we had something called the cadet prayer. I'm sure this is still the cadet prayer. This is the prayer used by all Protestant cadets. It starts, "O God, our Father, thou searcher of men's hearts." And it has a couple of paragraphs that have been very meaningful to me, not only in my cadet years, but in my life. Encourage us in our endeavor to live above the common level of life. Make us to choose the harder right instead of the easier wrong, and never to be content with a half-truth when the whole can be won. And it ends up, help us to maintain the honor of the Corps untarnished and unsullied, and to show forth in our lives the ideals of West Point. And at the end it says, all of which we ask in the name of the great friend and master of men, amen. Which takes me back to Rick's sermon this morning when he talks about friendship as being a wonderful Christian trait. Okay, we better move along here. About my very tough decision. After Europe, I came back and, I haven't even talked about Korea. I came back to Fort Lewis, Washington for 4 or 5 years. Then Korea had broken out, and many of my classmates had been sent over there. And I was feeling as though if I were going to stay in the service, I should get to Korea. If I were going to get out, I would feel better about myself if I put in some combat time. So I volunteered for Korea and went over there in March of 1953. It was just about over by that time. I was assigned as a company commander of an engineer combat company. I wasn't up at the front, but maybe 3 miles back from the front. And the war was very much with us at night, the sound of artillery fire up front and the sound of planes, of course, and that sort of thing. But I never was in danger of being shot at all. Our duty in my engineer company was basically one of the main line for troops and supplies to get up to the front. So we're responsible for the road system, which was all dirt, and also for river crossings. We had floating bridges that we had to maintain, and operating a ponton ferry across the bridge, across the river. Very interesting work and very vital, and the war was over after three months, and I had to put in another year before my tour was up. At the end of my tour, a very big decision I had to make. I was thinking about leaving the service at that point. Very difficult career decision, torn between my service duties and getting back to civilian life, where all my high school buddies were already starting in their businesses. And I made the very difficult decision to leave the service and left it in 1954. I decided to look for a civilian job. I found a job with a very great company, Bell Telephone Laboratories in New York City, and joined a group of young fellows, just 6 or 7 of us, who were being trained for leadership positions in the company. Up until that time, Bell Labs had raised their directors up through the ranks, and very few of them had college training and business school and that sort of thing. And so they started a program of hiring 6 or 7 each year to take over the management positions. And I joined that, very lucky to get in with a bunch of MBAs who were just starting. So went through this training program, and just very, very briefly, I was with Bell Laboratories for, let's see, about, a total of 30 years, and all in the area of staff management. The bulk of the effort of Bell Laboratories was, of course, science and engineering, a prestigious staff of well-qualified people from the very best schools in the world. And it was great doing staff work for them. This was staff work involving providing them with office staff and secretaries, looking after the maintenance of the buildings and all of the things necessary to let them do their very important work in their laboratories. During this time, I did take a course at NYU. I got my MBA in the Graduate School of Business, going nights. And so I was department head in various ends of the business. I was assistant to vice president for a number of the technical vice presidents, and ended up as director of security at Bell Laboratories. I retired there in 1986 at a very young age. I was only just over 60, and I took advantage of a downsizing program. They were getting rid of staff and had a very wonderful program of giving a 2-year payout for getting you to retire, and I accepted that. Let me tell you a little bit about marriage. I was living in Montclair at this time, and married at the age of 22, as I mentioned. And my daughter we brought back after our tour in Europe, and bought a house in Montclair. Shortly thereafter, I had 3 more children. Well, I should say my son Christopher was born in Salzburg when I was on duty in Austria. After we got back, my 2 little girls were born in Montclair. I lived in Basking Ridge for many, many years. I got involved in the Board of Education, was on the Bernard's Board of Education for 7 years. This was during the time that William Annan School was built. Some of you may attend school here. Wonderful years in Basking Ridge, starting in 1961. My first wife got cancer, and I lost her in 1983. And one of the fellow parishioners here, I think it was before the time of most of you St. Mark's people, Mike Hardy, any of you may remember him. He had lost his wife and got involved in a little club called One by One, a club of people, singles, who were no longer married. And Mike said, when I lost Bobby, Roger, when you're ready, when you feel comfortable, I'd love to have you join me at One by One and go to a meeting. So many months later, I went with Mike to a meeting, and there was Adelaide Flores, and she had lost her husband 2 or 3 years before, and I fell in love with her and married her. We put our families together, my 4 and her 2 boys. At that time, she's younger than I was, so her boys were just in, one of them just starting college, the other in high school. And I got to know them, put her 2 together with my 4, and we have a wonderful 6 children who are like brothers and sisters. I now have 4 grandchildren across the country, Denver and Seattle, and then some great grandchildren who are in their, 6, 7, 8-year-old, that sort of thing. So I'll say a little bit about retirement. Oh, I do want to say a little bit about St. Mark's Church during these years that the kids were growing up. They all were active. My son was, served up at the altar, and was a very good Christian. And I hate to say this to some of you parents, but when he got to college, he began to, I don't know, maybe he learned too much, I don't know, but he lost his Christianity, and from then on was not a churchgoer, and that bothered me. My 2 of my daughters, all their lives have been very good churchgoers, and I think that was born by their coming here to church when they were young girls and teenagers. I will say this about those early years. I became very active in the church, and St. Mark's just a very central part of my life as a vestryman and warden and that sort of thing. Let's see if there's anything I want to show here before I get into... one thing I do want to show, I was talking about my family. I'll show who they are. This is a more recent picture, so it does show my second wife, Adelaide, Addie. And then my children, Lynn. Lynn was a banker. She's now retired and lives up on Cape Cod with her husband, who was a fellow Basking Ridger, went to Ridge High, and they live on Cape Cod, and they have a couple of kids. Then my second oldest is my son, Chris. He lives down in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. He's now retired, has a couple of sons, one who works in Washington and the other lives out in Salt Lake City. My third one is my daughter Laurie, who has no children. She was widowed 8 or 9 years ago. She and her husband ran a bakery in Reston, Virginia, a wonderful life of learning how to run a small business. they sold the business. Her husband retired, and a year later he dropped over dead very, very suddenly. He was a runner, and he came in one day from running and made it to the front door, and that was about it. A very sad experience in the family. My daughter was devastated and sad for 2 or 3 years, and then she got involved in hiking, and on one of the hikes she met this fellow who was an avid hiker and bird watcher, and they started hiking together and fell in love and married. Gary's an Englishman, and he has become very much part of our lives, and as a matter of fact, they just went back to London a couple of weeks ago to watch my son Chris run in the London Marathon, and then to visit Gary's family and all of that in England. So that was a very nice turn in Laurie's life. And then my younger was Sarah, who had a very successful, wonderful marriage, never had any children, lived up in Massachusetts near the New Hampshire line, and worked as a businesswoman in personnel affairs, had a very successful business life, but then developed cancer and went through 5 wonderful years that she was able to keep working. She would have to go into Boston for treatments several times, every month or 2 for treatments. And so she fought it off, but finally succumbed to it and is gone. So that's my family. One thing I did, I had this being retired at a young age, just 60, and I don't know how many years I was going to have ahead of me. And I got involved in doing good works for the church. Around the corner is a home. I don't know whether many of you know about it, but home for abused women. And I got involved in that as a parishioner here and spent a number of years helping out there, painting it and doing yard work and all of that. That's one thing I got involved in. And then at one point, I saw an advertisement in the local paper for an outfit that was looking for models. And I'd never thought about this, but I was sort of intrigued, and this lady said, her name was Deanna Trust, and she had a local office, and she said, if you're interested, come in and talk. So I decided to take a chance, went in and talked to her, and she offered a course in modeling. This was something with my career I knew nothing about. So it was all about makeup and wardrobe and getting jobs and all of that. So I took a little course with her and then started looking for jobs. She was helpful in finding the first little print jobs with local outfits. And at one point, and I also would get involved in New York City. I had an agent in New York and frequently would get on the train, go into the city for what we saw go-sees, where the whoever was running the ad would be talking to 40 or 50 people and seeing how they looked and how they sounded and all of that. And on one of these, I ran into an outfit looking for someone who was going to be spokesperson for an outfit called J.G. Wentworth. And so I went for a go-see, and I was asked for a callback. A callback is always a good sign. That means they're interested enough to look at you a second time. So I went for a callback, and they told me what they had in mind, and they hired me as spokesperson. And that was a start of 10 or 12 wonderful years of being spokesperson for J.G. Wentworth. And it's a name many of you don't know. Maybe you see some of their advertisements. But this was J.G. Wentworth and what it looked like as a spokesperson for them. And I must have done, I don't know, probably 30 or 40 TV ads for them. And they used to show all the time. It was sort of fun to see them. They're still showing ads, but I think I've run out of business with them. I haven't seen one of my ads in 3 or 4 years. But that was fun, a wonderful way to wind up my business life.
Hey, Roger.
Yeah,
I was sitting in the American Legion Club,
yeah.
and the TV was on, and I said, I heard a voice, and I said, I know that voice. And I kept hearing it. I said, where is it? Up on the TV, there's Roger. This was in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, well, this was a few years ago or more locally, recently. Yeah. One other thing I want to mention is my very great interest in hiking. And this is something I got deeply into in my retirement years. And my family and I have taken a number of trips to Switzerland. And we have become well acquainted with the Swiss Alps. And I hope that you young kids in the course of your lives get a chance to get over and see the Swiss Alps and hike in them. This is one in, it's near Grindelwald, and it's just sort of typical of me as a hiker in hiking gear. And we used to go hut to hut. You'd spend a night in a hut, walk for 6 or 8 hours to the next hut, spend the night, and then walk on. I had a wonderful 1 week, something called the Tour Monte Rosa, which was around the Swiss and Italian Alps from hut to hut, and sort of in the shadow of the Matterhorn. A wonderful trip with a pack on my back. This is the Matterhorn, and I did get up with my daughter Lori. This is about 15,000 feet. It's not a tremendous mountain, but it was a wonderful challenge. I walked the first, 4 hours up to the Matterhorn hut, spent the night there, and then the guide gets you up at 4 o'clock in the morning before the sun is up and gets you out in front of the hut. And for the next 5 hours, you climb up to the summit. We got there about 9:30 in the morning. Beautiful view up there, of course. And I was with my daughter, Lori, a tremendous adventure for her, too. And that has stuck with her. She's done lots of mountain climbing since, and then back down the same day. So in addition to mountain hiking and all of that, with my wife, we've done an awful lot of traveling to Europe, South America. My wife is Colombian, so we've been all over South America, Argentina, and Colombia, and Brazil, and with my kids, and with my wife mostly, much of Europe, and also to China and Japan. Okay, I don't know what to say about my life, just that I feel it's been a wonderful, long life. I feel very lucky to not only be living, but still to be walking when I see other people in wheelchairs and all of that. That's thanks to my wife's cooking, I think, and staying active. I can't say how much my family has meant to me in my long life, how they've sort of been pulling me along and getting me to do that maybe have gone beyond where I should be at my age. My friends have been very, very important in my life, even though most of them are gone now, but friends here at St. Mark's, certainly. We're going to have our chance to say things about Father Rick in the next few weeks, and I can't say what sad words these were the other day to hear that Rick was leaving us. But I just want to say not only how important St. Mark's has been, but how, as a person, how much Rick has meant to me. He, I've lost my dad and my big brother and many, many important people in my lives, and I can't say that there's any man more important in my life than Rick Morley. Okay, I'm at a different end of my life than I am with the young people, and I think all my life I've been interested in poetry, and some years ago, I don't remember what age I started this, but I thought, gee, I love poetry so much, why don't I just jot down some of my favorite poems? So I started a little book here of something I call Poems I Love. And every now and then I've jotted down a poem. Most of these are poems you can find in great poetry. I love both British and American poets. And I've just selected a couple of them that I think may be appropriate to this group. A combination of young people who are just starting out, and that takes me back to my young years so many years ago, and then some older people here and where I am in life. Both of these poems begin with the letter R. One is called Reluctance, and the other, Reveille. Reveille is a good military word. Reluctance and reveille. Okay, this first one is by Robert Frost. I think you know Robert Frost. Maybe you study poetry in school, I don't know, but of course he was late 19th century, early 20th century, and I've always loved his stuff. Okay, this tells you where I am in life right now, and it's called Reluctance. Out through the fields and the woods, and over the walls I have wended. I've climbed the hills of view and looked at the world and descended. I've come by the highway home, and lo, it is ended. The leaves are all dead on the ground, except that save those that the oak is keeping. They ravel them one by one and let them go scraping and creeping across the crusted snow while others are sleeping. And the dead leaves lie huddled and still, no longer blown hither and thither. The last lone aster is gone, the flowers of the witch hazel wither. The heart is still aching to seek, but the feet question whither. Ah, when to the heart of man was it ever less than a treason to go with the drift of things, to yield with a grace to reason, to bow and accept the end of a love or a season. That's sort of where I am in my life. You know, I've loved my life, but I just know it's not too much more to go. But all you young people, it's all ahead of you and how lucky you are. So this is called Reveille. And Reveille, of course, is what soldiers hear when they get up in the morning with a day ahead of them. And you've got your whole lives ahead of you. This is by A.E. Housman. Of course, A.E. Housman is a British poet, lived sort of at the same time, sort of late 19th century, late 18th century, early 19th century. This is how Reveille goes. This is for you kids. Wake, the silver dusk returning up the beach of darkness brims, and the ship of sunrise burning strands upon the eastern rims. Wake, the vaulted shadow shatters, trampled to the floor it spanned, and the tents of night in tatters, straws the sky pavilion land. Up, lad, up, 'tis late for lying, hear the drums of morning play. Hark the empty highways calling, we'll beyond the hills away. Towns and countries woo together, Foreland's beacon. I wish I could read better at this age. Belfry's call. Never lad that trod on leather lived to feast the heart withal. Up, lad, thews that lie and cumber sunlit palates never thrive. Morns abed and days of slumber were not meant for man alive. Clay lies still, but blood's a rover, breath's aware that will not keep. Up, lad, when the journey's over, there'll be time enough for sleep. So you kids have your full lives ahead of you, so make the most of it, and I hope you find as much adventure in your lives and long life as I do. Thanks. Thank you. So I think there's going to be some food here, but Rick, is there time for a question or two? I don't know.
There's time for a question or two, of course.
It's up to you if anybody. Yes, sir.
Roger, I think since all of us are children of God, I think all of us are artists. I think you're an artist. I've seen your cartoons.
Very amateur, but I like to do it, yeah.
Your life, you've had a beautiful life. You've created a beautiful life. Do you see yourself as an artist, not just painting beautiful paintings, but are you an artist?
Well, it's a funny thing. As you heard from my education, I'm sort of basically an engineer. That was my early training. And yet I do see myself as being more of, I've always liked art of all types, not only visual arts, but I also love music. And I like beautiful things. And so I consider myself less an engineer perhaps, but a bit of a dreamer in those sorts of things. So I like all sorts of artistic things. I'm not a real artist, but I just like the arts.
Quinn has a question over here.
Yes.
Where's your son now?
I can't hear you, sorry.
Where's your son now?
Oh, my son lives in Chapel Hill, and Chris now is, let's see, he must be in his early 70s, and he is retired. He worked there at Duke University, and he still is extremely active. He picked up tennis from me. He still plays a lot of tennis, and let's see, I'm trying to think whether I mentioned this, but he just finished running a marathon over in Paris. So that's where he is, and he's married. His wife is a nurse, works at Duke Medical Center, and he's still very much a very vigorous young man. older man now. Loves North Carolina.
How many great-grandchildren do you have? How many great-grandchildren?
I have 2 great-grandchildren, yeah. And they're, let's see, one of them is in Denver, Colorado, so I don't see her. I see pictures of her. And the other one is out west too, yeah. So I don't see my great-grandchildren these days. Pictures is on. Well, I've enjoyed this very much, and I just wish you kids so much luck. And I just hope that your church continues to be a major part of your lives as it has been of mine. Thank you, Rick. I appreciate you.